All right. Welcome to episode 5000 of the Madison podcast. My name is Ben Lavender, New York's favorite British mortgage broker. So I'd like to think. Today we have a very special guest who I've been wanting to come onto the podcast for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, man.
I've been like attacking.
Been a year or more.
Yeah. And I'm excited to have Mr. Donovan Bailey with Coldwell Banker with us. And so Donovan, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, man. Yeah. So as I was talking to Donovan a little bit before the podcast, I was basically saying, without putting too much pressure on you, that you have a wealth of knowledge, right, in the real estate business.
Thank you.
And I think that you can spit some stuff out that people are really going to find actually valuable, because you know, like, the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Right. But before we jump into that, let's do our standard of telling us, like, how did you get into the real estate game? What do you love about it? What do you hate about it? All that fun stuff.
Great question, Ben. So 16 years old, wasn't the best student in school, but I did excellent in my business classes. I loved working on cars. I loved, landscaping, that sort of thing. Those were my things that I did. I worked in an auto parts store, and I remember I had a big afro. I had a beard that was big, but not this big, right? And I worked in an auto parts store in Franklin Square. My grandmother said we needed some help in our office to answer the phones, and she was an accountant in a commercial real estate appraisal company. So she made me cut my hair a little bit, clean up, took me to Macy's, got me some dress pants, some dress shirts, and basically said, you're going to come work in my office.
Amazing.
Right? So 16 years old, I had my first office job, and I did not know what they did in this place. And I just kept asking a lot of questions because I never heard of an appraisal.
Right.
And I said, what is this? And there's different departments, and there's appraisals done for many different reasons. A lot of people think just buying and refinancing. There's appraisals done for tax purposes. There's appraisals done for, partnerships if they're looking to sell. So there's just so much different things going on in this office. So I spent a lot of time reading appraisals in my downtime.
As a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, so say that one more time, please.
So I spent a lot of time reading actual appraisals to understand what it is that they do, because I had just no clue.
So the reason why I find that so hilarious, obviously as a lender, we look at appraisals all the time. They're not like fun coloring books. Right. They've got all these calculations and these tables and comps and this and that. It's not something that a 16-year-old would typically go out of their way to read. And then now you got to
keep in mind, a commercial appraisal could be 100, 200 pages, right? And
so Don, would you just like read it until you would understand, or you would ask questions and like, what does this mean? What does that mean?
Kept asking questions.
Because the idea of reading, like, I'll give you something similar. When I first started in the mortgage business, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was a 22-year-old idiot.
Wow.
And I would just read the underwriting handbooks.
Okay.
And just because I was like, I'm not like learning through just cold calling people for business, right?
Right.
So
you don't learn from that.
Right. So it's like you went over and over and over. It's just funny that you did the same thing, but at a way younger age.
Way younger.
And like, how long did you do that for?
So I started off at 16 in the summer, and then, they asked me, are you going to have your own car and be able to, do some field work for us? So I eventually moved my way up to then going to different county halls, pulling deeds and pulling zoning maps, tax information on properties, and also taking pictures of buildings. Right. As you know, you need pictures of the comps in the reports. So I was traveling all over New York City, Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Nassau, Suffolk. I was on the road literally all day. Even sometimes I would head into Jersey, and I lived on the road like 5 days a week, 6 days a week.
How do you like that lifestyle?
I think at like 18, 17 years old, it's exciting. Yeah. Because you're going to places that you've never been, and you're seeing places that you never saw. And I ate a lot of pizza back then. So I ate in every pizzeria probably south of 110th Street in the city.
Great.
So the exciting thing was the food.
You could do your own pizza reviews, man. We don't
Yeah.
need what's his face, David Portnoy. You could do it.
Yeah, that was my thing, was pizza back in those days, and it was cheap and quick. So I learned the foundation of how to research properties at a young age, and back then there was microfiche. Things were not on the internet.
Right.
A lot of people don't know what microfiche is.
I don't know what microfiche is.
You don't know what microfiche is? So it's like a film paper that's very small that you put under like a magnifying glass and this big machine, and you look in the machine and you will see, and you move the sheet around and you find what you need and you print it, and it prints it out.
I feel like this is something I did in school.
Yes. In elementary school, probably. Yeah. But
So what were you using it for?
If you need to look up property information.
Wow, you would just get like that.
Right. Yeah.
You have to look at like old records,
You gotta
basically.
realize.
How far would the records go back that you'd be looking at?
I realized this went online, in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, and then you were looking up stuff from probably decades before that too.
Eventually a lot of municipalities upgraded their systems.
Yeah.
And, here we're on the internet age where you can just now go online and find out what the taxes are, find out if there's violations, find out if it's open permits, look at a deed, look at, mortgage stuff. So it's just like, it's a different world now, different ball game. So that was my thing back in those days, was just doing a lot of research, taking pictures of buildings. And then they said, are you interested in becoming an appraiser? And I said, yeah. And then, I got on-the-job training before I even went to school for it.
Right.
By the time I started taking my classes, I already started appraising already, and I was already out on my own.
Amazing. What did you study in school?
So I went to Nassau Community College. I started off studying business administration, and at the same time, I was taking appraisal classes at a different school.
You're a hustler, man. Hard worker.
Yeah. So I was.
That must have been crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy and exciting. And, 18, 19 years old, making a full-time salary was pretty...
It's pretty sweet.
It's pretty exciting,
But also exhausting because you're essentially going to school twice while working full-time.
Yeah, eventually I dropped out of
energy,
college, and I went back, several years later. But, I concentrated more on the appraisal classes, which take a couple years to
Do you feel college is a necessity for someone to be in the real estate game from a sales standpoint?
It's a great question. I think let me say this. When I got into real estate sales, I felt I would do good because I felt I knew so much about real estate.
Right.
I had a very big shocking experience when I started doing deals with people who did a lot of deals that didn't know a lot about real estate. And it came down to being popular, having a great personality, and also marketing. There's people who spend a ton of money on marketing.
Which is all the top producers, right? That's what they're doing. They're networking nonstop.
So,
they're making friends.
it's not really about having all this knowledge, I guess I'm a nerd. I'm a real estate nerd. So, that's just me. Per se, I deal with a lot of complicated situations. So,
well, one of the reasons why I find you so interesting, Donovan, is because you have achieved a very high level of success in the business.
Thank you.
Without being, even though you are a popular person, you're a good network just based on your Instagram, like you're always in the mix, but your foundation is knowing the game, like really knowing the game. So it's really nice to actually show people that you don't have to be, the prom king or queen to succeed in real estate. Like you can have, so let's chat about that because I do think it's important.
Right.
How do you leverage your knowledge and also bridge the gap between yourself and acquiring business do you do it by showing your knowledge, by demonstrating it, or has it been over time it just happened and you got referrals that way? Because that's, again, the reason why I'm asking, I have to give you the frame, is because there are people who just aren't these like massive extroverts in the business, and they're, you know, like you, like more on the nerdy side of real estate, and they're like, how can I achieve success without going to 5 different networking events a week, basically?
Yeah, the networking events are great to build relationships.
Yeah.
In my opinion, once you build those relationships, you can maintain them without having to be at every event.
How would you recommend doing that?
You call people and you add value. If you have a listing, you say, hey, I got this coming up, I got this I'm working on, do you have anybody? There's a lot of events that we do for charity. You could always invite other people to it. And I have a lot of friends in the business that are in different companies that, either refer business to me or I refer business to them.
Right.
And it's just like, I don't look at people as a competitor. I look at them as, a pair, even though we're in different companies, we're all, working towards the same goal, which is helping people. So, I have great relationships outside of my office, which I love.
You have both. And you're keeping in touch with people by, you're not calling them to ask for business, right?
No.
People know who you are and what you do, and then it's like, hey, come to this event, or I have this deal for you, or something like that. That's the way that you do it.
Well, you just add value. So I always have people who reach out to me who don't understand something.
Right.
And they nickname me the real estate encyclopedia. And
I could see
basically what they do is they say, hey, I have this situation, or I have this property in another state. How do they do things there? And I tell them, like, I don't know. Or I'll say, but you know what? Talk to this guy. Here's his number. He knows. Or people call me for an expediter, or they call me for whether it's a lawyer or whatever it is.
Do you feel expedite is actually worth it? I hear mixed things from, or more so from investors.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So I had a situation where, by the way, I always end up with a lot of complicated stuff. Had a property that when they ran a title, there was a permit filed for a change in the meets and bounds description.
Right.
For some of you guys who don't know what the meets and bounds description is, a legal description that tells you where exactly the property lies. So it says like 200 feet from 90th Avenue, and it tells you exactly precisely where a property is. So there was no change in the legal description. So I called up so many different expediters and I told them the problem that I was having to see how they can rectify it. And people were just like, I don't know what to do. I'm sorry, I can't help you. And the lawyer that I work with, she had a guy, called him up, and he got it squared away.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are things that, like, the average homeowner or investor wouldn't be able to probably, you know what I'm saying?
They can't figure it out themselves, or even most investors, especially like the newer ones. And I've seen, at least on our side, the investor competition is drying up because the margins are so much thinner than they used to be, and it's much harder. Donovan, do you do more sales with end users, or are you more on the investor side?
I do more with end users.
Yeah.
I do work with investors. It's a very, good amount of business I get from that.
I mean, the reason why I say it is because it's talking to you. If I was an investor, I'd want you on my side. End user too, for sure, but because you know the nitty gritty.
Yeah, and I have clients who are, there was a year, I forgot what year it was, maybe 2022, where I would say half of my sales were to people or from people who had a real estate license. New York real estate license. Yeah. So half of my clients were licensed real estate agents.
How does that happen, and why? I think that's great to talk about as well, because the average realtor listening would be like, why would I use a realtor to help me buy or sell, right? So
Right. Good question. Well, everybody's situation is different, right? Some people have a real estate license, but they're not active.
True.
Right? Some people might have a real estate license, get a listing or have a potential listing, and it's something that's like completely over their head, like a property with violations and non-paying tenants and what have you. You have people who I have a lot of unique relationships. I've made a lot of introductions to people, and basically my clients thank me for that by when they renovate the properties, they give me the listing back.
As they should. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, not everybody sees it that way.
Yeah.
But,
Not.
you know,
Yeah. I do.
It's one of those things where those who understand, do great.
Yeah.
And are very successful, and then those who don't get it, they're like scurrying for the crumbs that nobody else wants.
What do you mean by that in terms of the deals?
The deals and stuff with small margins, the stuff
Right.
that's But yeah, that's a story for another day, man.
Yeah, we could leave that. Do you do any investing yourself?
I do, not a lot. I typically been behind the scenes kind of guy.
Right.
And one of my goals is to be more of an on the scenes kind of guy. So it's been
Project management, more your thing.
It's one thing to say, like, here's the money, Ben, go do your thing, right? Then to being like, Ben, what do you think about this blue door?
Right.
So it's two different ball games, So, we get very busy in our day-to-day lives and what we got going on, and eventually we have to shift into things that are going to be more beneficial to us and things that we have more passion into, So that's what I go with. I go with my passion, how I feel, and what I enjoy doing.
So what does Donovan, walk us through a day in the life of Donovan Bailey, right? What are you typically on your standard day, not the one-off? Like, how do you schedule it? Do you have a typical routine that you like to follow that you find makes you most efficient? And how do you schedule, like, your sales and your calls and all that stuff? And if you want to give away some secret sauce, you're welcome to. I can't force you.
Good question. I don't really have anything that exciting to really say besides, wake up, play with my son for a little bit. Every morning we have tickle time, tickle him a little bit,
Great.
Get him going, get him laughing. And wifey makes us breakfast. We eat good, and...
As you should.
Yeah, and then, I'm more of a late guy, like later in the evening kind of guy,
Right.
Because a lot of people work, and I like to reach people a lot of the times after work, so they have time to talk. Sometimes they don't want to talk about personal things at their job.
Of course. Yeah.
So, I'm always answering the phones and answering calls, like from like 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning. But I get to the office. By the time I get to the office, I am,
So you go to the office every day?
I go to the office pretty much like 4 or 5 days a week.
That's right. That's unique.
Yeah.
Very
So I'm in the office usually like all day, all night.
Right.
I'm usually the last guy to leave. So I feel there's less distractions.
Yeah.
In the office, especially when there's you're home, and now my dynamics have changed. My son is 3 years old, so they're running around, they want to play.
And you want to as well. You want to
yeah,
spend time with them.
yeah,
so.
yeah. And he's in love with my desk. I have a work area, and I have a home office, and I have a whole full setup with printers and computers and all that, records. So sometimes I just need to get away from all that,
Right.
So I have a great office, and I was just telling him that I have a podcast studio in our office.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
And you haven't invited me? Come on, man.
Yeah, I haven't done any podcasts. I've just only used it to make videos.
Right.
It's like fully soundproofed. It has all the lights, everything.
To be fair, we use the room for the same thing.
Yeah.
So actually, my office, I'll show you after. I soundproof the entire office. It's the same size as this room, so it looks ridiculous.
It's
huge.
huge.
Because we're like half the company like loves house music. So on
Nice.
Fridays at like 5:30, I blast it for like half an hour. But
Nice.
it's more of a summer thing. You gotta have some fun with it too.
Yeah.
And shooting content, because you do a good amount of content on. How do you schedule that? Is it scheduled? Is it just sporadic as the ideas come?
What I did when I was early in my career, I looked at a lot of other agents who were doing great on social media, and I was really inspired. Right. Especially by Sean Waller. I was very inspired. Yeah. I was on his podcast
Gentleman.
probably 3 years ago. He's a great guy. And I kept seeing this guy pop up with all these videos, and I was like, these videos look cool, and I was like, damn, this must costs a fortune to make this stuff, you know? And I said, you know what? I kept fighting. I didn't want to do videos.
Right.
I felt like I just wanted to throw out information, educate people, be more behind the scenes, because I was used to being a behind the scenes kind of guy as an appraiser.
Right.
You don't have to make videos, and nobody cares. You get your business, you get your work, you do your work, and that's it. But I realized I have to be like in front of people, my face, talking and connecting with them, and that really inspired me to do videos. I started working with a company that helps me with all that stuff, and it's been great. So it's like another job, you know.
Right.
But I freestyle a lot of my content. Like I would like take like a topic, and then I would just get in front of the camera and just
go off.
Yeah.
I
and
find
then sometimes
that's
I
the
write
best
it
thing
down
to do.
and start doing a script, but then you start forgetting what the script says, and it becomes you reading it doesn't really flow.
Yeah, we have a teleprompter if you ever want to use it.
Smart.
I never use it.
I thought about getting it, but
honestly, I don't think it suits you, right? Because you don't need a script.
I'm not that extra polished kind of guy
that
talks like he went to Harvard. I'm just a regular guy, and I know what I know, and I can help people, and I can show them that who I've helped, and everything is public record. You can look me up, you can see what I've done. So basically, it might not come off as polished as a lot of other people, but it's just me and it's my personality, and I'm good at that.
I honestly disagree with you, Donovan. I think you're extremely sharp. And
I'm a hard critic on myself.
Extremely well spoken. That's also the best way to be.
Yeah.
I think we should all be our own worst critics. If someone else is criticizing you and you take that to heart more than your own opinion, I don't think that's a healthy mental balance even. Okay, another thing that I want to jump into, because you have, again, a wealth of knowledge, so let's take advantage. Going into our current market, because it's a volatile time, no one knows what's going on, what advice, or you could even, let me rephrase, what would be the best mental approach that buyers should take when it comes to purchasing a home in New York specifically?
So honestly, there's going to be some disappointment out there. No matter how much money you have, there's always going to be somebody with more money than you. Whether they have a bigger down payment, they have better financing terms. But there will be a day where you will be the person with more money than everybody else. When it comes down to putting offers in. So you just got to be patient, stay optimistic, stay realistic, and don't fall in love with every single house you see, because it becomes very discouraging.
Yeah.
And I let people know
don't get emotional.
This is going to be a journey.
It's
going to take a few months probably to find that right property, to get the accepted offer.
And it can happen sooner, but that's not the norm.
No.
Right? The norm is
I took out one time and that's it. Boom, done.
Yeah, that happens.
But I cannot tell people that that's what to expect.
Right.
And there's been clients that we're looking for a year, and either the living rooms are too small, or they don't like the way the bedrooms are laid out, or whatever the case may be, and then it's like they get discouraged and then take a break, and then they come back to me a few months later or a year later, and then we start going out again, and then we find the right property. It's just timing.
Yeah, and what would you say is the average timeline, Don, for when someone starts looking to the time they close, typically?
I think it's going to depend on the exact neighborhood that you're looking to purchase in.
Right.
Going from Queens, right, or South Queens area, comparing it to, let's say, Huntington or Valley Stream, it's two different worlds. Right.
Very.
So there is big difference in supply and demand. In Nassau County, you have super high demand.
It's crazy.
In areas where have a little bit lower demand, you have a shorter time where you can literally drive around and see 4 or 5 different properties, and then they might have one offer here, one offer there, maybe another one might have no offers, and you can shoot your shot, and then boom, get to be that lucky where you can be in and out, 3 months or less.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have people who want something very specific. It could be a year.
Yeah, I've seen that, especially like short sales is another thing, right? Those can take
like
forever.
the client that we closed on in Brooklyn, we were looking for a year and then stopped, and then it took a few months, and then I found him something relatively quicker. It's also going to depend on what the interest rate's doing at that time. If people are still a little shell shocked about like, oh my gosh,
So you're saying because I think I get it, like because it makes them more hesitant.
Well, it's like if interest rates jump up tomorrow to 7.5%, things might be slow motion in certain areas and business as usual in other areas.
Right.
So it all depends on what's going on in that specific time period.
Yeah. In my opinion, New York has always been a low inventory place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, sometimes it's worse than others. Like to give you an example, right? When I started in the business 13 years ago, we were doing almost all our deals had concessions on them back in 2012, 2013. I haven't I still see some concessions here and there. It depends. You get a little window, but I haven't seen that be consistent for at least 7 years at least.
It's not the norm.
No, not at all. But back then, to me, it was the norm because it's like, okay, this is all I know, and then it's like,
I think things just become popular for a period of time.
Yeah.
And there's people out there marketing it heavy, and it's just like things are just like fads.
Yeah. And like the 3-2-1 buy down is another one.
Everything's fads. They go and they come. Like back in my earlier days, I remember getting approved for a mortgage. I was like a piggyback mortgage.
Yeah.
Like an interest only and 80% interest only.
They came
20%.
back, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they're back.
Oh, my God.
You don't do them often, but, sometimes people need them. So, because
yeah.
people want to avoid PMI, and it's like, okay, but you're paying this anyway. Whatever. So that's another thing. Let me flip the question, Donovan. What advice or approach would you give to people looking to sell in this market?
It's a great question. Great question. If you're looking to sell your house, you need to make it as attractive to buyers as possible because a lot of people are just not going to see the vision. A lot of people just don't get it.
Are you referring to the aesthetic of the home or okay?
Inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, you need to really know what is going on with your house. Do you have open permits? Do you have violations?
So how do you recommend a seller goes about finding that out?
If they're not hiring me, hiring a professional real estate agent who does a due diligence ahead of time.
Right.
Because it can leave you in a very bad situation.
So are you connecting with a title company before you put a market sale and getting a preload?
So it really depends on what the situation is, right? And I'm going to tell you when I go to a title company. But first and foremost, what I do is I check for violations and open permits and anything that could be an issue with traditional bank financing, right? Now, if there has been a bunch of no consideration transfers, I do a judgment and lien search on the individuals involved.
Right. I don't know a single realtor that does this, by the way. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, because sometimes people could be messy and have, life is life, right? We all have our ups and downs. But if you have judgments against yourself, or if somebody you transfer the property to has a judgment on them and you transfer the property back to you, what ends up happening is those judgments have to be paid.
Right.
So you want to really have an idea of what you're going to walk away with, so
like an actual accurate
So if you have back taxes, you could figure that out. If you have
water bills are a big one.
Water, unpaid water, you can figure that out. But if you don't know that, your brother that you transfer the property to, he has credit card, he has lien or something like that, or unpaid taxes,
right.
That's going to have to get squared away. And it could be $20,000, $50,000. It could be, I've seen people, have a lot going on and just so basically you really have to have a strong idea of what's going on with everybody else that you transfer that property to.
Yeah. And during the average transaction, this is handled in the middle of the deal. It causes massive delays in closings, and the attorneys, depending on the attorney, some attorneys are fantastic and they get it solved, but that's not the average attorney, right? The average one dilly-dallies, takes forever.
Everybody thinks that real estate law is extremely easy. It's not.
Right. Especially in New York.
When you're doing a deal, you know, a lot of times you could have something smooth that just goes the way it's supposed to, or you can have something that just roadblocks that come up.
Right.
I like to know ahead of time what those roadblocks are so I can discuss it. So like you come into one of my listings, I'm going to tell you right away everything that I know that's not 100 with the house. Right. I'm going to tell you there's deferred maintenance. I'm going to tell you that there is open violation. I'm going to tell you that there is open permit. So this way you have the option to walk out that door if you don't like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you don't want to basically, you're avoiding what a lot of people purposely put off, because to the average person, Don, that is like that's an uncomfortable conversation to have, and agents don't want to risk.
The people get mad at me some of the times when I tell them the bad news, and it's like, you know, I don't own the house, you know.
Yeah, you'd rather know ahead of time.
It's not my house, this is your house. Unfortunately, these things do happen.
Yeah. And if it's not for them, they can move on. And this way you're not wasting the time of your buyer or your seller as well.
I'll tell you what happened with a client of mine who, her attorney, you know, this is a complicated situation, but an attorney recommended them use a specific realtor.
Right.
She said she wanted to work with
for
me.
The buy side or the sell side?
Sell.
Got it.
She said she wanted to work with me. He said, oh, but no, my friend, he's going to take care of it. So the friend lists the house, doesn't do due diligence. There's open permits for things. And what ends up happening is the lawyer never negotiated, like, you know, like, hey, we're selling this as is. You don't like it. We put the property back on the market and we get another buyer. It was like, all right, we'll hold money in escrow and seller will, you know, get it remedied, whatever. And then they put a time frame on it. And seller is trying to get it remedied, and it was just like nobody wants to touch it because there's a specific time. And it's not a realistic time frame to get this closed out.
Right.
So now here you have this money in escrow. It's a loss, because if you can't do what has to be done, you know, and they hold a significant amount of money.
Yeah, typically what, double, triple in your experience?
Yeah, if they hold $20,000-$30,000, man,
right.
You know, if you negotiate, you know ahead of time, like, hey, this is the deal with this house. If you buy it, you have to be okay with it, right? So what happens with that is you might lose one or two buyers. You have people that might try to negotiate a little bit on the price, but you have people who will see value. If the house is a value and the price right, you will get the market value for the house, and be able to close, and everybody's happy because they know what they're getting themselves into. They agree to this, right? And you move forward. Otherwise, you take a loss.
Yeah, but you're having the conversation up front with them, whereas most people in the business are candidly, one, they're not even doing the due diligence.
They don't know.
Well, it's a combination of the two, because we know that there are people who know that there are issues with the house and they will hide that information. But I don't think it's hiding it to purposely be deceiving. I think they just don't know how to have that conversation with people because they're not familiar with it. And I mean, then you need to get someone else involved so you are familiar with it. Okay, time-wise, we're at 36 minutes. So let's try and wrap up. Actually, another question I wanted to ask you, Donovan, before we finished up is, what is your ideal client to work with? Like, who do you jive the best, the most efficiently with, and who really could use you as a resource? Because you are a resource.
I seem to work well with people who have a very laid-back personality. People who are like, they need it right now, tomorrow, you know, and I have a very laid-back personality myself.
Yeah.
I get the job done, and sometimes people feel like when you're not like hyper or like jumping, you know, doing jumping jacks, that you're not really doing a job.
Yeah, which is not true.
Wow, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just quiet about it. I do my thing. I tell you what I'm doing, what we got going on. So, my personality is not for everybody. When it does come to dealing with buyers, I'm very realistic on how aggressive you have to get with the offers.
Right.
Some people don't like that.
Let me ask you a question about that, Donovan.
Yeah.
At what point are you having that discussion with the buyer? Meaning, like, are you doing it at the first conversation? Are you waiting until you have to place the offer to be like, hey, if you really want this, this is where you need to be. This is the type of down payment you need to put. That's another key thing.
Yeah. So, again, property by property.
Right.
You could show them one property and there could be a line around the corner. You could show them another property and there's 2-3 people that nah, this is not for me. That they might like. So I gauge it on what I feel the interest is.
Gotcha. Yeah, you're just reading them and adapting to your client. Which is, to be fair, though, as you say that, it's much easier to do when you have a wealth of experience, because naturally, after doing it for a long time, your ability to read people in the scenario is instinctive, right? It's like you can probably, because I know this because I feel this way. It's like when someone's telling me something after 20 seconds, I can generally predict the next 2 to 4 minutes of what they're going to say. I don't cut them off because that's rude and people want to be heard. Yeah, let them talk. But do you feel that you just have that sense when you're talking to people? They ask one thing, but they mean another.
I have a lot of great relationships with a lot of people, and the same way I deal with them, they deal with me. They tell me this is straight, basically with the buyers, everyone wants to deal. I would say a lot of the accepted offers I get on my clients are either below asking or at asking these days.
Right. That's nice to hear, honestly.
Yeah, people are saying that you got to go over asking. You got to do the research on what's sold in the area. Is a property priced $100,000 below market value? Some agents are like, oh, I got $150,000 over asking. Well, you're supposed to because you priced the property so low, Right. And I'm not gonna say I haven't done it, but I don't go and gloat about it. Right. You know what I'm saying? But you really have
nice
to
little dig
show.
there. I like it.
Yeah, you really got to send the people the comps of what's sold so they see what similar houses have actually closed for, so they can make an educated offer on a house, right? Because anybody can ask anything they want. You want to make realistic offers. I mean, they got to get appraised for whatever you're asking for, right? So why go so far over if you don't have the money to pay the difference? And I wouldn't want anybody to pay the difference,
Yeah.
So you don't want to put these hypothetical offers, I call them, and I get them all the time. And I present them to my clients, and it sounds good, and I tell them, I was like, you get to have that honest conversation. Your house is not worth that. And they don't have the money to pay the difference. Yeah. So what's going to happen is you're going to appraise for $650, not the $720.
Right.
There's times that it could happen. But if you have a strong,
and it does. I mean, look, during COVID, it was more common then for appraisal values to come in shorter, and it was also more common for people to pay the difference. Yeah. And people were willing to. It's all market driven.
And listen, I do ask agents hey, send me proof of funds, let's show me that this can get done, and it just can't get done.
Yeah.
Because it's there's people out there, and what their strategy is I'm going to go to 5 houses or whatever amount of houses, and when we put the offers in, we're going to put the offers so far above asking, we're going to get an accepted offer, and then we're going to cross our fingers that the appraisal comes in low, and then they're going to have to just adjust the sales price to the contract price, the contract price to the appraisal price.
But most agents,
bad strategy.
And it's a terrible strategy. In my career, I've had 2 occasions where the appraisal value has come in at the contract price, and the buyer wanted to challenge the appraisal to lower the value so they could do what you just said. And right, and they didn't tell us the strategy, obviously.
Wow.
And they're like, oh, it's worth less. And just then why'd you sign a contract? It's crazy. You should have at least discussed this with me first, and most of all, your attorney. I mean, crazy. And now, It's idiotic, if you ask me. Absolutely idiotic. But, they probably read some forums or something and were like, let me try
Everybody
this
thinks
strategy.
they got this trick up their sleeve.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you real quick about something that I was watching. I'm watching like an online, I don't want to say it's a podcast, but it was an Instagram Live. And this guy is a credible investor. And he says, you don't have to pay real estate taxes on your house. And I'm thinking, he's like, I don't pay real estate taxes on my house. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I was like, you gotta pay. I was like, how you don't have to pay real estate taxes? And I was thinking about it. I'm thinking. Then I said, oh, I know what he's doing. His house is a religious facility.
Ah. Cheeky monkey.
To go around and tell people to do that kind of stuff, man, that's,
Oh, the amount of especially again, this was rampant during COVID, was all the house hacking stuff. Yeah. Use FHA to buy a full family and never live there and go to jail. These
a lot of these things are hypothetical. You can do it in theory, but sometimes in reality, you might not be able to do it.
Yeah, one, don't commit fraud. Right? That's one. But two, look, a lot of them, I do agree, they're very hard to execute, but it's also possible with the right team. With the right team, you can accomplish anything. Okay, so let's wrap this bad boy up. Donovan Bailey, thank you again for coming. Where can the people of the world find you if they need you?
All right, so on Instagram, Don Bailey, NY. That's where I'm at. Facebook, Donovan Bailey. YouTube now, I haven't really told anybody of my YouTube channel yet, but it's Don Bailey NY.
Love it. Don, thank you very much, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Peace.